wonderful writer, I'd like to introduce Amy Curtis.
It's February. I was thinking a love story. My sister Jane had knee replacement on January 13th. She had to be at Palos Hospital at 8:15 and, can I just take this mint out of my mouth? She had to be at Palos Hospital at 8:15. Surgery was scheduled for 10 a.m. I volunteered to take her. Picked her up around 7:30 and we made our way. We arrived and Jane checked in at a kiosk and I was given a disc, like the kind you get at a restaurant that lights up when your table is ready. And it was supposed to light up to let me know where she was in the process of the day. Surgery, recovery. Jane told me I didn't have to wait. Said I could just drop her off and come back when it was done and she was in her room. It was gonna be a long wait. I told her, no way, I'm waiting for you. And it was a long wait. And with time on my hands, I did what I always do. I started thinking about all the times I've been in hospitals over the years. And I know this is gonna sound weird, but hospitals had been like a love school where I learned all these different lessons in love. Because sitting in the waiting room, I remembered being in the hospital in North Carolina, in the delivery room, mid-contraction. I was tired, I was hurting. I'd already done a whole lot of pushing and had more to go. And I'm looking out into the delivery room and there's my husband, Dave. He's standing there and his eyes lock onto mine. And for all the times my husband has told me he loved me, nothing said I love you quite like the look he gave me. I believe in you. You are amazing. I can't believe you're doing this. You're doing great. You got this. I can't believe we're really having a baby. I love you. He said it all, standing there at the end of the bed, his fists clenched, his forearm raised, and a single fist pump with a look on his face that said everything. There are lots of ways to tell someone you love them. With a final push, that baby arrived, and oh my God, I thought I knew what love was, but I'd never felt like that before. As they laid my baby boy on my chest, I thought my heart would burst, not from the weight of him, but from the enormity and immediate and immense love for him, the depth and breadth of love. As soon as that baby and I were taken to our room, I picked up the phone to call my parents, and my mom answered. "We got a boy here, Mama." And she said, "Oh, honey." And I could hear the tears in her voice, and I know she heard the tears in mine when I blurted out, "Oh, Mama, this is how much you love me?" Because I didn't know how much she loved me until I fell in love with my boy. We don't always know how much someone loves us. It was back in the hospital when one baby was soon to become two, again, in the middle of contractions, where I still carried the thought I'd had for months leading up to this moment. It was guilt. Guilt because I was excited about this new baby, but I was certain I wouldn't love her as much as I loved my baby boy. It wasn't possible. And I was both worried and guilt-ridden about it. But my love for her hit me like a tidal wave the moment she was born. The guilt, the worry, it disappeared because there's always more love. It was those babies more than anything else that drew my parents to North Carolina. And man, those were some good years. Birthdays and holidays together, do-nothing days together. We had so much fun. And even when my dad was diagnosed with pulmonary fibrosis, he and we took it in stride. It was something he'd have to live with, and he did. Until it became evident that the disease he was living with would be the disease he would die from. And maybe it's because they were such good times, we generally tried not to face it. But it was in the hospital, My dad in his hospital room, my mom and I in a room down the hall when the social worker and hospice nurse came and spoke to us. They said they had spoken to my dad. "You told him he's gonna die? You talked about dying?" I asked her. And she said, "Yes, I did." And I remember she said, "It's the elephant in the room. He's thinking about it, you're thinking about it. The not talking about it leaves everyone alone to deal with it on their own." And I swear that day opened the door to more conversations with my dad, more closeness with my dad than I'd had my entire life with him. It's important to talk about the hard things with the people you love, and it'll be okay when you do. Dealing with hard things came really, really handy when a few years later, it was my mom in the hospital. And my mom, well, from the time I was a little girl, I had it in my head that I could not live without her. That without her, I couldn't survive. And I can't say I ever truly grew out of that belief. In her last years, she was prescribed medicine for her arthritis and medicine for her constant debilitating pain. And I joke with her that I hope she was taking her immortality pills too, because it didn't matter to me that she really couldn't walk, and I didn't care that she couldn't do most any of the things that she used to do. I just needed her to stick around forever. But it was in the hospital where she was taken the day she woke up one morning and literally couldn't move. Who knew what was wrong with her or what the fix would be? Her room was filled with doctors lined up on each side of her. Someone from oncology ready to test for cancer, a respiratory guy, someone from physical therapy ready with a vigorous rehab plan. No, she wasn't gonna have any tests for cancer. "I'm 86 years old," she said. And the vigorous rehab plan, it sounded like more work and more pain than she could handle. Standing at the end of her bed, watching her, seeing her, she wanted none of it. She didn't need a fix. She needed to be allowed to just wind down. And though I wanted her to live forever and honestly didn't know how I would manage without her, what I wanted or needed, she'd been there for me always, through everything, and I had a chance to really be there for her. You don't have to do anything, Mama. It's hard, but loving someone means you love them more than who you want or need them to be. It was days before Thanksgiving, and I don't remember why my brother Peter was in the VA hospital in Milwaukee, but I remember it was my sister Lisa and my brother David and I there with him. And maybe I can't remember exactly why he was in the hospital, because it paled in comparison to what was discovered while he was there. The x-rays of his lungs showed a mass, and the doctors were all but certain it was cancer. A biopsy would confirm it and tell its type. Peter was the rebel in our family. You'd be hard-pressed to find much in his life or his opinions that followed the norm. So it shouldn't have come as a surprise when the doctors recommended a biopsy and Peter flatly refused. "No, I'm not doing any of that." And Lisa said, "Peter," and before she could make her argument for getting that biopsy, he said, "This didn't happen kneeling in church pews." Peter didn't follow the norm, was never much for going with the program, and he had taken his hits for it for all of his life. But he always had kept on living, and being diagnosed with cancer wasn't going to change that. Because I know this may sound bizarre, but for as much as there was talk that day about cancer, there was also talk of Thanksgiving. Peter wasn't much for holidays or special occasions, but he did love Thanksgiving. Let's just do Thanksgiving. He was handed some really, really shitty news, devastating news, but he wasn't going to let it stop him from living. We were going home and we were going to do Thanksgiving. Take each day as it comes and keep on living. I love that. When George was diagnosed with cancer, just within months of Peter being diagnosed, he committed to the fight. The chemo, the radiation, he fought the fight. And he was cancer-free for a while, until he wasn't. And there were lots of days in the hospital. And then there were the last days, and we were lucky to have them. I hated why we were there, but I can't deny that there is nowhere I'd rather have been. Those days are precious to me. Everything slowed down. Everyone was stripped down. There was no armor. The unimportant things, which included nearly everything, fell away. Hugs were tighter and lasted longer. I love you spoken so freely. The simple things were the biggest things. Sharing a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, David giving George a shave. The right here, the right now, love and being together was all that mattered. They were hard, hard days, really hard days. But there was a sacred beauty to them, and I loved those days. Living and loving without armor, sharing the smallest of things. I love living in that place and don't know that there's anywhere I feel more alive. It was only a couple of days after George died, my brother David landed in the hospital. Touch of pneumonia, something going on with his heart. He was sick. Maybe too sick that he might not be able to go to George's wake. But not so okay that there wasn't every reason to believe that he would be okay. Still, I went to the hospital. My sisters and I went. And it was during the day, like when most people are at school or work. And of course, David's there, and so is his wife, Vicki, and his daughters, Jody and Kristen, granddaughter, Nicole. And David looks pretty good. He's sitting in a chair waiting for lunch, and we're all just sort of fluttered around him, taking up all of the available seats in the room. We're just hanging out. And all of a sudden, my sister and my niece come walking in the room. What are they doing here? My sister-in-law, Kimmy, has just lost her husband. My niece, Lisa, her dad. There are arrangements to be made, lots of stuff going on. And they've already spent so many days in the hospital, but they show up. And the day of George's wake, David was sick, but there was no keeping him away. Because that's how it is. When you love someone, you show up. Even when there's a good excuse not to. Even when you're not invited, you show up. And maybe it was that hospital love lesson that had me sitting in the waiting room instead of dropping Jane off. I didn't care that I'd been sitting there all day. Being there was a way to show up. But damn, if that day in the hospital, my school of love, it delivered another lesson. Because we get to the hospital and Jane checks in and then they give me the light up disc and then a nurse comes and she's gonna take Jane back to hook up her IV and she tells me that she'll come back to get me so I can go back and sit with Jane until they're gonna do her surgery. So Jane goes off with the nurse and I'm sitting there by myself and there's a man in the waiting room. He's loud and I don't know what he's talking about, but I think it was political. And I don't care for the tone of his voice. I wish he'd be quiet. He's obnoxious. And I decide within moments, I don't like him. And the nurse arrives and she takes me back to the curtained cubicle where I sit with Jane. Another nurse comes in, the anesthesiologist, her surgeon. It's all routine. They do this every single day. They've got it down. The surgery will take an hour and a half. Recovery will be about an hour. I've got my light up disc to keep me posted along the way. They got this, we got this. I'm not worried about her. I know she's gonna be all right. Still, after I'd stepped away to go to the bathroom, as I was returning to her bedside, I closed my eyes and I just tried to will some please take good care of my sister energy around her, because this whole thing might be routine, but she is precious to me. I love her. And then I hear the voice of the man from the waiting room. He's talking again. And I can't see him, but I can hear him. He's in the curtained cubicle next to Jane's. I can't see him, but what I can see is the woman at his bedside. And I imagine she's there at his bedside for the same reason I'm at Jane's. He is precious to her. And seeing her changes my mind about him. In an instant, he goes from being the obnoxious guy in the waiting room, the one I don't like, to being a man, precious to her. And I think, wow, I gotta remember this. Everyone is loved by someone. Everyone you meet is precious to someone. And it's maybe the only thing you need to know about them. It was well into the afternoon, sitting in my love reverie, and my disc lit up, and the doctor found me. She did great, he said. And I told him, thank you. It's been worth the wait.